Hi, I'm Joe Bressler and I'm a filmmaker based in Brooklyn, New York. Recently, I was hired to shoot a project for the BBC and we needed to use the FX3 along with Super 35 anamorphic lenses. Specifically the 40mm Evolution 2x anamorphic by P&S Technic. We were using this lens to shoot B-roll that would be used to supplement a story we were working on, but the BBC was kind enough to let me hang on to the lens over the weekend to do some tests and film some footage to share with you. The Sony FX3 is a full-frame camera, and there's a common misconception about Super 35 anamorphic lenses covering a full-frame sensor. But these anamorphic lenses were designed to cover the 4x3 surface of film and RE 4x3 open gate, which has a height of 18mm. This is the same height as the FX3 in most full-frame cameras sensors. This means that Super 35 anamorphic lenses work well for these sensors natively. Besides having some extra real estate on the east and west sides of the frame, that's where the perfs on 35mm movie film would have been. This extra real estate usually consists of distorted or vignetted image area. Here's a handy on-set workflow if you want to use the Super 35 anamorphic lenses with a 16:9 full frame sensor. Shoot in 4K or higher full frame. Choose what aspect ratio you want to finish in. Traditional anamorphic is 2.39:1. De-squeeze your footage accordingly, either in camera or using a monitor. The FX3 can do this natively in its own firmware, or you can de-squeeze on an external monitor like the Small HD Indy 5 we used. You're going to get a super narrow 3.5:1 frame. You'll most likely have heavy vignetting going on towards the sides of the image. This is the extra left to right real estate that I spoke about earlier. Use the in-monitor crop tool to crop your image to the correct aspect ratio. The resulting image resolution will be between 2.5 and 3K depending on your cropping method. You'll either have to up-res a bit on a 4K timeline or use the footage on a 1080 timeline. If you're shooting a Super 35 anamorphic lens on a full-frame sensor like the FX3, you have to crop the image in order to get a conventional 2.39:1 frame. If there's any vignetting from the lens not covering the full-frame sensor, you're going to be cropping past it anyway to get to a conventional 2.39 frame. On a normal Super 35 sensor, you're cropping in past the usable image from the lens's design sensor coverage. So a Super 35 anamorphic shot on a traditional Super 35 16:9 sensor is actually wasting good information. The Evolution 40mm was specifically requested by a producer I was working with. We were actually doing a crop in on the image to get a 2K 16:9 frame. Shooting with this lens in a 2.39:1 aspect ratio, it felt quite a bit wider and quite funky. Personally, I love the distortions and the bokeh from this lens, but I definitely understand it's not for every project. The P&S Technic housing was also super compact and robustly built. I wish I had more time to play around with the lens, but it had to go back to the rental house. So is the FX3 a great tool for 2x anamorphic shooting with Super 35 glass? If you're finishing in a 1080p timeline, the FX3 is usable for anamorphic shooting with Super 35 glass, since the cropping on the left and right side of the frame that you need to do to get a conventional frame will be removing the vignetting or distorted parts of the image. If you're finishing on a 4K timeline, the crop you need to do may result in an unacceptable loss of image quality, but it's ultimately subjective. I also wish the FX3 had internal ND, then I wouldn't have had to deal with the slight vignetting the matte box gave me when focused to infinity. If I could have chosen any camera though, I probably would have picked one with a 4K 4x3 shooting mode like the Alexa Mini, or at least a higher resolution 17:9 sensor to allow for the potential of finishing on a 4K timeline without upscaling. Apparently when they use these lenses, the 75mm in particular on the Creator, they used AI to enhance the upscaling. They must have been pretty committed to using the FX3. That's all for this time. If you liked this video or hated it and thought I got everything all wrong, let me know down in the comments. See you next time.